Evidence of industry today is apparent at Ingleton with the quarry, at Horton, Ribblesdale with the quarry, at Helwith Bridge with the two quarries. Perhaps not many people would associate Ingleborough, even Ingleborough the mountain or the hill, with industry in the past. But again, the evidence is there. At Helwith Bridge, there were a number of quarries. Dryrig, which originally was two quarries, dryrig quarries. Arco, which originally was two small quarries, Arca. Coombs Quarry, which is in the picture there, high above the cottages at Fourdale, and you can see there the horizontal limestone above the very steeply dipping earlier Silurian beds, and that fantastic unconformity between the two. Studfold Quarry across the valley, and Sunnybank Quarry, which is the one that's water-filled and is now a leisure fishery. So you had all these quarries that were producing what the quarrymen called, as in the advert there, blue flags. When they're wet and when they're freshly exposed, they do have a sort of greyish blue hue to them. They're not really flags, that's just a quarryman's term. They're sandstone, thin sandstone pieces. And Christopher Ralph was from a family that lived in Upper Settle, who ran a couple of the quarries at Helwith Bridge for many years in the 19th century, and that advert there you can see he was making headstones, brewers' vats, water cisterns, manure tanks, etc, etc, etc. You see these blue-grey features all over the place, all over the villages, sometimes in the fields or by a barn as a water trough, and the Ralphs were one of the major players. Dryrig Quarry, or Ridge as I say it was, now produces just roadstone aggregate, one of the strongest, most skid resistant rocks in the country, but in the past it was producing these flags. And Sunnybank Quarry likewise, and the masonry in that photo on the right still stands in a rather ruinous condition, and people often wonder what on earth was it doing there by the riverside. Well, you can see in this picture there was a water wheel and the vertical shaft, and that shaft at the top of the current masonry structure was linked to beams that fed the processing plant, the stone cutting plant of Sunnybank Quarry. These are three earlier references to the quarries at Helwith Bridge. There were plans to build a canal from Stackhouse round through Giddleswick, past Horton and westwards. And in the prospectus, one of the advantages of people investing in that was the many inexhaustible quarries of blue flags, grit flags, blue slate and grit slate. So this is late 18th century. But even before that, in February 1739, John Ingleby, who was the landowner, lived at Ostwick, leased John Ridley of Lauchland, who was just a yeoman farmer, and Thomas Armitstead, who was a husbandman, which was theoretically a lower down the social scale kind of farmer. They leased the right to dig stone. And there are several surviving leases in the 18th century which all refer to mines, delfts and quarries of blue slate, and usually the length of lease was 7 years, and of course the landowner got not only the rent, he also got royalty on every ton of stone taken out. What is not recorded, at least I've not found any reference to it, if you go on the path from Clapham, up past Trowgill, past Gapinghill, up to Little Ingleborough, when you've gone up the really steep bit to the snout of Little Ingleborough, there's this very disturbed ground, which is evidence of not really quarrying, because they weren't sort of digging down to get the stone, but what used to be called stone getting. And stone getting was done by stone getters. They didn't call themselves quarrymen, they were stone getters. And you've got all this litter of stone there is the result of their efforts getting stone for roofing flags, for lintels, door lintels, window lintels, door jambs, door bases, and so on. You get the same kind of thing on Ingleborough, on the arcs, these huge litter of stone where there has been significant quarrying. When it was happening, as I say, is not recorded, probably from the 17th century through to the early 19th century. And you get, not just on Ingleborough, but on other hills in the area, you get these little shelters. That's a 20 centimetre scale in the top right picture. These little, usually one person, I know a 1-2 person shelter, very crude, just so that the stone getters could get out of the wind. If there was a hailstone or a snow shower or a big heavy rain shower, they could get out of the weather temporarily. And then you get littered about the hill, particularly below Black Shiver and the Arch. You get things like there in the top left, a rounded stone. That's what's called a negative. So something rounded has been taken out, and that's what's been left over as waste stone. And on the bottom picture there, you can see very clearly on the vertical face tooling marks where they've been using a sort of axe-type tool, a stone axe, to separate the stone, what is now grass, from what's been left there. So you've got a lot of evidence of stoneworking across Ingleborough dating back at least 300 years. And there's also evidence on Little Ingleborough and below Black Shiver and the Arcs of the production of millstones. And there are 3 examples here. Now, when the millers came to buy the stones that they wanted for their mill, because the previous ones were worn out, they bought them in unfinished state, as rough out. They were taken back to the mill and finished off there. The one on the top left is obviously much rougher than the one on the bottom, for example. The sizes vary. Got the metre scale in the top 2 pictures, 20 centimetre scale in the bottom, and these are at the foot of the steep slopes. The millstone grit from which they're made is at the top. To get them from the top to the bottom, they simply rolled them down. And those 3 are sitting there where they landed, and they would have been further shaped down there before being taken off. Why they were not taken off, who knows? But this is just 1 or 2, Little Ingleborough and Ingleborough, this is just 2 of many, many areas in the Dales where millstones were worked. From, well, the earliest record we've got is 1588, but there are certainly records from the 13th century right through to the 19th. There was also on Ingleborough attempts at mining. This is Lead Mine Moss above Criner Bottom on the footpath going from Ingleton up to the summit of Ingleborough. You've got on the top picture there a couple of, or 3 actually, pits, delphs following the line of the vein. On the bottom one there, similarly, you can see the delphs, the individual delphs, and all the waste stone littering about. This Lead Mine Moss mine is actually recorded in September 1703, and Henry Bouch of Ingleton, who was the landlord, the lord of the manor, he leased to John Blackburn of Friar Head, which is at Winterburn in the Malham area. He leased to Blackburn the right to dig, delve, trench, sink shaft, drive levels or open cast, etc., 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 to get lead ore from Little Ingleborough and Scalber Gate, and on Easgill and Ingleton Pasture. Ingleton Pasture is where Lead Mine Moss is. Now, Blackburn was determined to make some money. He employed 2 men to open up the vein and to work it, as you saw there, and to dress the ore, and for that he paid them £3.16. He then had it sent by pack horse to the smelt mill at Marwick in Swaledale to be smelted, and the transport he paid a further 16 shillings. To have it smelted and assayed to see how much lead the ore contained cost him a further £1.16. Add that up and convert it to modern money, you're looking at a few £100s. When he got the results back from Marwick Smelt Mill, in Blackburn's own words, quote, "It proved good for nothing." He'd wasted his money. In 1835, the then landowners of most of Ingleborough, which was James William and Oliver Farrer from Ingleborough Hall at Clapham, they entered into a 21-year contract with James Thompson of Kendal to, quote, "try for mines of ore." And there are several small trials scattered across Ingleborough, none of them big. This is the biggest. It's on the OS maps, it's called Lead Mine Hole. It's at Sotherscales. The top picture there shows the entrance to the mine, which has been partially backfilled, partially blocked. The one at the bottom shows the beautifully cut adit, which runs for 48 metres, turns right at a right angle for 3 metres, and turns a reverse right angle for 12 metres. That bit there is 1.9 metres high, 1.2 metres wide. It's beautifully cut. It failed. And if you look on the spoil heap, you won't find any evidence of lead ore, but you will find copper ore. So it should be called Copper Mine Hole. Apart from so-called flagstone and sandstone and millstones and lead and copper, Ingleborough has a lot of evidence, a lot of ground evidence of the burning of lime from different periods. This is the same wall we saw earlier, the head wall between Bleak Bank and Newby Coat, this late medieval wall, late monastic wall. And the feature there with the ranging pole in the middle, you can see it's got a curving circular bank coming round to the camera with an entrance beyond the ranging pole, very, very close to the wall. There are two of these here. If you go on the other side of the track that leads steeply up from Newby Coat, there's a line of 6, there are 2 others, and then there's another one. So 6, 7, 8, 9, there are 11 of these, what I call sow kilns. It's got nothing to do with pigs. These are an early form of lime kiln, a very early form of lime kiln. In fact, we excavated one in 2014 in Crummockdale, at the head of Crummockdale, one of these sow kilns, and we got dates from radiocarbon dates from charcoal that go back to the 11th, 12th centuries, which is remarkable. And they remained in use for absolutely centuries. I'll come back to how they worked in due course. This is the geophysics plot for one of the sow kilns on the other side of the Newby track. The key thing is the dark red and the yellow at the bottom there, that like a horseshoe shape with the blue in the middle. And that's exactly the same shape as you saw in the previous photo with the earthwork. That's a classic earthwork shape, and it's a classic geophysics magnetometry signal for a sow kiln. And the red is showing burnt material plastered to the sides of the kiln, and the blue is showing material that's been infilled where there's a very low signal. So you've got a very high positive signal, the red and the orange, the yellow, a very low signal, the blues and the greens. And most sow kilns will give a signal like this. This is the plan of the 6. So just to the left of sow kiln 6 is the track, the steep track coming up from Newby Coat past the big quarry down there. You've got the wall running along, and you've got these 6 sow kilns in a row. Again, all facing the wall, very close to the wall, like the photo I showed you a bit since. And then you've got the quarry, just not that many metres away, which is a very shallow quarry, completely grassed over. And that was the quarry that would have supplied each of those 6 kilns. They were probably worked by different people who had different bits of the quarry where they could take stone from, and they were obviously in use before those walls were built. Now here in 2005 we excavated sow kiln 3 and sow kiln 5. We didn't get any dating evidence from sow kiln 5, but in sow kiln 3, inside the what's called a stoke hole, which leads through the kiln to the back wall of the kiln, where the oxygen went in to feed the fire, we found a nice, carefully placed collection of horse bones, a skull, a shoulder blade, a few vertebrae, and a long bone, carefully placed. We did another excavation of a sow kiln in Fazer Nick, for which we also got dates, and in that we found an identical burial, the same horse bones, skull, neck vertebra, shoulder blade, long bone. They were not horses with disease, they were not old horses, they were not chucked in there to get rid of them, with the lime to get rid of them. They were put in there, I hate using this word, as a kind of closure ritual. When the kilns were abandoned, for whatever reason they were abandoned, the lime burners wanted to put something in there to placate the evil spirits. And it's common, not just in kilns, but in various features, that these sort of place deposits were put there for that purpose. We had these dated from sow kiln 3, we had the ones from Fazer Nick dated, and they both came out roughly 1440 to 1640. Quite nice early dates. The way a sow kiln worked, you dig a bowl, the material you're digging out you use to make the bank around it. You put your stoke hole through the middle, made of stone, and then you stack. You get your fire going with kindling at the bottom, then you put some coal on, or whatever fuel you were using, could be turf. Then you put a thin layer of limestone, a thinner layer of fuel, limestone fuel, till you level with the top of the bank, and then it was domed over and covered with turf and just allowed to simmer for maybe a week or a few days, depending on the weather and the time of the year. And then the whole thing was dismantled and out came the lime. Wonderful little things. Very different from the later field kilns. This one above Robin Proctor Scar, this one probably dating from the mid 18th century, where the lime stone and the coal went in at the top, dropped down slowly through the bowl, vertical bowl, and was drawn out of the bottom at the back of the arch. So the middle part of the kiln is where the lime was actually being fired or calcined, changed into quicklime. The hot air from that rose to warm up and dry out the fresh stone going in at the top, and then the quicklime, the burnt lime, was drawn out at the bottom. These are scattered all over the dales, and most of them were feeding, used on the pastures for either reclaiming pastures from open moorland or for periodic top dressing. They were not used continuously month after month after month. They were just used periodically as and when needed. So that's what we call a field kiln. Getting into the 19th century, when industrial production began, this is a quarry. It's above Fourdale cottages. If you didn't know it was there, then from the valley floor you wouldn't know it was there because you can't see it. It's quite a large limestone quarry. It was worked from 1878 to 1958. It's called Fourdale Quarry, and it was abandoned suddenly. And apart from the ironwork, well, not all the ironwork even then, everything was fossilised. And you can see running across the foreground a rail track. You can see it curving away up the left-hand side of the picture. You've got a couple of drains. You've got the remains of a blasted building on the middle left. You've got another one up towards the top right. Running from that one leftwards, you can see perhaps an iron pipe. That's part of the compressed air system, which is still there. It's a wonderful thing, and I did a survey of it some years ago, and that's the survey looking towards the camera as in the previous picture. So the black squares are buildings, the straight lines are tramways or rail lines, as are the curving lines. The dashed lines are compressed air pipes. The double dash lines are the drains, and you've got the incline coming down, the double solid line coming down the middle of the plot, and then right at the bottom right of the image you've got the square on the track, which was the drum house, and the incline leading down to the lime works below, down to Ribblesdale Lime Works. And top left of the picture is the quarry. You've got the incline coming down past Fourdale Quarry cottages down to the lime works at the bottom. You've got Archaeology Quarry there above it, as it was when this picture was taken in the 60s. Archaeology Farm still there, middle right. And you can see the kilns there with 3 kilns on the one axis, and there was another kiln which isn't clear on there, but it's near that black structure. So the little trucks trundled down the incline, came onto the top of the kiln. The stone was tipped into the top. That black structure is where the coal was raised to the top. It's just like a glorified field kiln. The lime was drawn out of the arches at the bottom and straight onto the rail wagons that you can see there. And then the other buildings there are the ancillary buildings associated with a lime works. And right at the bottom in the middle is Fourdale Farm. So this lime works, what's left of it? A couple of platforms. The rest of it's gone because the entrance to the modern Archaeology Quarry, which when this was taken didn't have a road access, is actually where the kilns stood. So this is something that most people, you wouldn't know it had ever been there. Further up the valley, you've got Horton Quarry, and in 1888, John Delaney, who was he needs a video to himself. He took out the lease on a quarry there, 1880, as I said, and the top picture there is right at the beginning of his operation. It looks real Heath Robinson type. You've got the incline coming down from the top left corner, with the tracks just laid on top of the grass. Coming down, you can see the man on the top at the right is stood next to a V-shaped skip, which is side tipping. So he would tip it to the man below, leaning on his shovel, who would then shovel it into the crusher, which was operated by that wheel thing with the 2 upper wheels, the traction engine providing the power, and then the 2 men at the bottom there with the wheelbarrow. They would then take the burnt lime, the crushed lime rather, which is in there in that pile. They would take that along the plank, walk the plank down to the lime kilns further down. That was it in the late 1880s. The picture at the bottom in the 1960s, when they were using 4 what were called priest nibs kilns. They're made of steel, but they're working basically the same way as a field kiln. The stone goes in at the top, the coal goes in at the middle, and the quicklime comes out at the bottom. The last of those was demolished in 1985. So you've got a long history on Ingleborough of industry, stoneworking, millstone production, lime burning. The evidence is still there if you, again, as I've said, if you know what to look for and how to recognise it.